Hmm. Oh, hey. Today I'm going to do a book review of this book that I just finished reading by Tim Ferriss, Tools of Titans. And I'm not a real big fan of the subtitle, but anyways, bear with me. There's a lot in this book. Interviews with all kinds of people who have been called successful by other people and who are happy, healthy, or wise, or a combination of all three. That's sort of going back to a Benjamin Franklin quote, I believe. Anyways, you can see that I studied this book intensely and used a lot of sticky notes. I started off with a system as far as sticky notes goes, as far with colors and everything, color coded, but ran out of colors, so ended up just putting sticky notes in important places. I also, probably even more useful, was I kept a running one of these large format. I think they're 4 by 8 sticky notes in the on the page that I was reading, and then as I would go, I would write down stuff that I liked, especially quotes. For example, on page 529, there was, I don't remember who it was in right now, but I could look it up on the page. They said, "We don't have a problem in this country with learning disabilities, we have a problem with teaching disabilities." And I really like that turn of phrase, and this book is full of quotable things such as that. Tim Ferriss did a really good job of distilling a lot of ideas and practices into words and sentences that you can use. So, for example, just flipping into the middle of the book, here is an interview with Naval Ravikant, and you can see he says, "The most important trick to be happy is to realize that happiness is a choice that you make and a skill that you develop." And Tim Ferriss bolded that. So there's a lot of things in here where he's sort of already done the highlighting for you, which I really like because it's prioritizing the information, and that makes it so that you can use this book, instead of reading it all the way through. You can have this book sitting next to your work desk, and whenever you need a little bit of motivation, you could flip through here and literally just look at the bold parts and find some inspiration. So I just flipped into here and found something which I want to give praise to Tim Ferriss for tackling this subject. I think at this point he's successful enough that he's not very worried about tackling controversial subjects. And I just flipped into here, and what came up was an interview with someone that talks about microdosing LSD at work. So he goes a lot into psychedelics. He is also very honest about his own shortcomings as a person, and he describes things that a lot of people would be too embarrassed to describe about their personal life. So props to Tim Ferriss for that. And he admits at the beginning, that there's going to be some of these that are not going, some of these interviews are not going to appeal to everybody, and that he's hoping that you will go through here and find things that will apply to your situation. I just flipped through again and found he has a pretty short interview with Paulo Coelho, who is super famous for his book, The Alchemist. And another great quote right here. I definitely wrote this one down. "The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion." So lots of great deep stuff. I highly recommend the book. I actually checked it out from the library and have had to refresh it 2 times so that I could get through it. I just finished it a couple days ago. And just to give you a little idea of how I use this book, I had it sitting next to my desk, and for my morning routine, I do journaling for 15 minutes. And actually, my journaling practice was changed because of this book. I adapted some recommendations about from the 5 minute journal and have applied those to my journaling practice. So in the morning, I have a whole series of things I'll talk about in another video that I do. And I started reading this book for 15 to 30 minutes every morning right after my journaling session. So I had this book sitting there as soon as I was done with my journaling, take out this book, read it. And the great thing doing this early in the morning was it helped with what Tony Robbins calls, he says, state story strategy. So it's very important to start before you start getting into your work, to start with your mental state and your emotional state, and reading tidbits that have already been highlighted of people who have struggled with things. There's a paraplegic in here. There's other people who've really struggled with difficult situations to become successful. And you read a little bit of one of those things, you get some inspiration, and that's very a motivational thing to do before you get into your own work. So obviously a way better thing to do than reading your email first thing in the morning. So anyways, that's how I use this book. I would definitely recommend it. Like I said, I checked it out from the library, but it's $28, and this is a fat book. You could definitely read it multiple times or skip around in it, and it was worth it to check out from the library. Obviously, it was free, and it had to come from the Mendocino County Library because they didn't have it at my local library. I wish they would get it, but it's probably worth a buy. I'm just trying to practice getting books at the library instead of just buying tons of books, because sometimes I don't even end up reading them. But I definitely read this one. A great book, Tim Ferriss. I suggest going out there and getting it. I'm going to look at some of his other books too, but this was the first one by him that I read. And I found out about Tim Ferriss, I think, through Chase Jarvis podcast or something like that. And yeah, so that's just a book review about Tools of Titans. I recommend looking at it, at least checking it out at the library. And, if you want to buy a book that's motivating and also has strategic ideas, you will be, filling up lots of notes. Like, I think I have 20 of these sticky notes full of them, So, yeah, okay, one last thing that I'm going to end on is this quote. There's who is it that talks about it? Darn, I would have to look it up in there, but just this idea not to say I'm busy, because that's such a cultural phenomenon in our society, is to just say, oh, I'm so busy. Or when people ask you, how are you? Oh, I'm busy. Well, in this book, there's a great part about, like, just stop saying that, okay? And you can say, oh, I'm working or I'm doing this, but just repeating this thing of I'm busy, it's this weird, I think the person here phrased it like this: it's disguising your bragging as a complaint, because you're actually trying to brag about, like, how unavailable you are because you're doing so much cool stuff, or you're doing so much stuff and you hardly even sleep at night. And it's actually disguised as a complaint, and it just gets old. So anyways, don't tell people that you're busy. And that's one lesson that I'm trying to apply to my own life from this book.